All right, so get ready because today's deep dive
Yep.
is a little bit different. We're going to be talking about baseball English.
Baseball
Yeah,
English.
baseball English. Now you might be thinking, wait, I thought this was a business podcast. I don't really care about baseball.
Right.
But stick with us because it turns out that even if you've never swung a bat in your life, baseball lingo has, well, it's really infiltrated everyday English, and we're going to show you how.
Especially in the business world.
Yeah, especially in the business world. Our source for this deep dive is an English learning podcast that uses baseball commentary to teach vocabulary. That's actually pretty clever.
Yeah, it's amazing how these terms, they all started with America's favorite pastime, but they've evolved to have a much broader meaning.
Yeah.
Almost like a secret code we use without even realizing it.
Right. So the podcast starts with these commentators. They're describing this really tense game, and they're throwing out terms like national anthem, pitcher, winding up, just classic baseball stuff.
All very vivid. You can almost picture what's happening, even if you're not a fan.
Exactly. And then they use the word scrambling to describe the players trying to field this really powerful line drive.
Scrambling is a great word because it really captures that chaotic energy on the field.
Right.
It kind of gives us a hint as to how these baseball terms have gone beyond the sport itself. They've become metaphors,
Right.
adding color to our everyday language.
So let's break down a few of these metaphorical home runs.
Yeah.
Let's start with up to bat. In baseball, it's pretty obvious you're the next one hitting.
Yeah, but think about pitching a new idea to a boardroom full of executives.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Right, you're up to bat, the pressure's on. Can you hit a home run or are you going to strike out? It's a good way to describe being put on the spot.
All right, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But what about strike one? I mean, we're not actually calling strikes in a business meeting.
True, but the concept translates perfectly to the business world and beyond. It's about understanding there's a limited number of chances you get before things get serious. Like, you miss a deadline, your boss might say, all right, that's strike one, don't let it happen again. It's a warning.
I see. So it's not just about a literal warning.
Right.
It's more about realizing your actions have consequences.
Exactly. And speaking of high-stakes situations, what about curveball? On the field, it's that pitch designed to fool the batter.
And in real life.
It's any unexpected challenge or problem that comes your way.
Right. I remember the podcast had this hilarious example of this woman on a date who got totally thrown a curveball when the guy suddenly asked her how many kids she wanted.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. It's
Uh,
a perfect example of how a curveball can catch you off guard. You have to think on your feet
Right.
and be adaptable.
So a curveball doesn't have to be a bad thing, right? Like
Yeah.
it could be an unexpected opportunity.
Definitely.
It could push you to grow. Maybe that curveball question on a date leads to a better connection.
Well,
It's all about how you handle those unexpected twists and turns.
right. Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum, hitting a home run isn't just about achieving a major success, like landing a big client or exceeding your sales target.
Oh, I see.
It can be anything where you're exceeding expectations.
Like going above and beyond.
Yeah, like the podcast gave some examples, like you give a killer presentation or you cook an amazing meal for your friends. That's a home run.
Right. And the podcast made an interesting point that even though baseball may not be like a worldwide sport, it's such a big part of American culture,
Yeah, for sure.
which is probably why all this baseball lingo has become so common, even when we're not talking about sports. So even if we don't realize it, we're speaking baseball English all the time. But why does this matter? Why should we even care how a sport influences the way we talk?
Well, that's a great question. And honestly, it's something we'll be exploring more as we go deeper into this deep dive. It's not just about baseball. It's about how language evolved and changes and how it reflects the culture around it. It's really fascinating.
It's amazing how these baseball metaphors can really add like a certain vividness to what we're saying.
Yeah.
Like even a sense of humor.
Yeah.
But do you think there are ever times where using them might be a little too casual,
Yeah.
especially like in a business situation?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think it really depends on the situation, who you're talking to.
Okay, so it's all about being strategic.
Exactly. Like if you're giving a really formal presentation, maybe too much sports jargon wouldn't go over well.
Right.
But, if you drop in a baseball metaphor here and there, it can lighten the mood, help you connect with people, and it can even be a really effective way to get your point across. It says a lot about how powerful shared cultural experiences are and how they shape our language. It's like we all understand the rules of the game without ever stepping foot on the field.
Exactly. Now, I'm curious about some of the less common baseball terms. I remember the podcast mentioned a few that were really insightful, like, do you remember ballpark figure?
Oh, yeah, ballpark figure. In baseball, it's the estimated number of people at a game, right?
Yeah, and in business, it's like giving a rough estimate when you don't have all the exact numbers, like when you just need a general idea.
It's a good way to make a request without sounding too demanding. Like, instead of asking for a precise budget number, you could say something like, hey, can you just give me a ballpark figure for this project? And we'll go from there.
Oh, that's a good point. Sounds much less intimidating.
Exactly. It shows you're open to discussion and collaboration.
Right. So what other interesting terms did the podcast mention?
Well, they talked about screwball, which in baseball is a type of pitch that has a really unpredictable spin. It's kind of wild.
Hmm.
But outside of baseball, we use it to describe someone who's, well, a little bit eccentric, unpredictable, maybe even a little crazy.
Oh, yeah, like that one coworker who always has the most out there ideas.
Mm.
Or that friend who makes decisions that just make you scratch your head.
Exactly. They're always keeping you on your toes.
And speaking of curveballs, I remember the podcast mentioned how hitting it out of the park doesn't always have to be about a huge success.
Right. It's not always about those major accomplishments.
It could just be someone who's doing a really amazing job no matter what it is they're doing.
Yeah. Like you could say, the chef hit it out of the park with that dessert, or the musician totally hit it out of the park with that performance. It's basically a way of saying, wow, you did a fantastic job.
So are we saying that by understanding these baseball metaphors, we can actually get a leg up, so to speak, especially in business?
I think it's not just about knowing what the words mean. It's about picking up on those subtle implications.
Oh,
Like using a baseball metaphor can make you seem more approachable, even in a really formal environment.
it's like you're all speaking the same language, even if you come from different worlds.
Exactly. It's about finding common ground. But I'm curious, is this just a thing with baseball? Or do other sports and hobbies influence the way we talk?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like we've just scratched the surface here.
Right.
I bet you there are tons of words and phrases that come from sports and hobbies that we use every day, and we have no idea.
Oh, absolutely. Think about boxing. Like when we give up, we say throw in the towel,
Right.
and we criticize people for hitting below the belt.
Oh, that's a good one.
Then you've got horse racing, neck and neck for a close race.
Oh, yeah.
And then like dark horse for someone you didn't expect to win.
Right.
And even sailing, not exactly the most popular sport, but we take the wind out of someone's sails.
Wow, that's amazing. I've definitely used all of those phrases before, but I never really thought about where they came from.
Right.
It's like this whole secret language we've been speaking without realizing it.
It really shows you how connected our language is to our culture. Even activities we don't personally do, like it's all woven together.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the big takeaway for our listeners? Like, why should we care about where these everyday sayings come from?
Because language is so much more than just words. It's how we connect with each other, how we understand each other, how we make each other laugh. And when we pay attention to where our language comes from, it helps us use it better.
So it's not about just trying to sound cool
Right.
or, throwing in a fancy metaphor.
It's about appreciating how rich and complex language is and how it really reflects who we are.
This deep dive into baseball English was really just the tip of the iceberg.
There's a whole world out there.
So here's our final curveball for all of you listening. Think about what other sports or hobbies might be shaping the way we speak without us even knowing. Pay attention to your conversations, the things you read and watch. You might be surprised at what you find.
And hey, who knows, you might even hit a home run in your own communication.
Until next time, keep exploring and keep on learning.